today speaking with Monique Pettigrew about seller-held financing. Very important part of her whole real estate buying program, and maybe it will be good for you as an investor to know how to do seller-held financing. So Monique, why don't you jump in and share with us about how you got started in seller-held financing?
Yeah, so I got started in seller-held financing in 2019. The big thing was towards the end during the whole COVID bubble, where we saw prices get so inflated.
And they're still there today to a degree.
Still there today, yep. I was fighting with primary home buyers who had low interest rates when I was doing the BRRRR method, which the BRRRR method is how I've been able to amass the amount of units that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And every single deal that I was making a cash offer on, I was being outbid by at least 20 to 30 grand, if not more. So I had to get creative, and I started learning a little bit more about how I can give sellers their offer price and exactly what they want, because in their heads, a lot of times sellers have a number that they're not willing to negotiate past. So I was able to give them that number, but they have to give me the home on terms. So what this could look like is I put down anywhere from 30 to 50%, and the seller will carry the other 50%, we'll just say in this example, until they are ballooned out of that transaction.
Let's start with hard numbers on a few deals that we've done together. So let's say the seller wants $200,000 for the property. Let's walk through the whole transaction from start to finish, from offer to what happens post-closing on a $200,000 transaction, because I want the viewers to be able to see and write down the numbers so they see how it works for them.
Absolutely. So we can do the first deal that we ever did together, which is, can I give the address?
Sure.
Okay. 8902 Silver Spring Drive. Is that it?
West Silver Spring Drive.
West Silver Spring Drive, yep. That purchase price was $200,000. We did $100,000 down, and we had the seller carry $100,000 for 5 years. We also have a monthly payment at $500 a month for that property, I believe.
$458.
$458. Awesome. And the way that the process worked for this deal, I had an agent that wrote the offer up and presented it to Melanie.
I worked for the seller.
Yep. Yep. This deal was on market, and Melanie went back to the seller and presented the offer. The seller accepted the offer, and then we continued through the process. After we got the signed purchase agreement back, I have a transactional coordinator that handles a lot of the details on the deal, making sure that the paperwork is submitted directly to either the agent or the seller, which is additional paperwork, the note, additional addendums that we need. We get all those signed, and then...
Can I jump in with a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's two parts to this well, there's probably more than two parts to the transaction. There's the original offer with the down payment amount, and then there's the seller held piece of that, which is the additional paperwork you're describing.
Correct.
So you have a bank note for the original down payment?
Yes, in some cases I do.
Okay, and in some cases it's cash.
Some cases it's cash, yep.
And then the seller holds the balance. So in this transaction, Tim got the $100,000 down, and you have the $100,000 note with him that you're making that $458 a month payment on for 5 years. Then at the end of the 5 years, or sooner, with no prepayment penalties,
correct,
what happens?
The seller will get either portions or the full amount. So in this case of the $200,000, we have the $100,000 down. The additional $100,000 will then be ballooned to the seller.
Okay, and so the payments in between, they're interest-only payments?
Yes.
With a balloon at the end of the 5 years or 3 years or 4 years, whatever term you've negotiated.
Correct.
And do you have an objective within each property that you're hoping to pay it off before the 5 years, or is there a window that works? How do you determine that window?
Yeah, so we have a financial calculator that some of my team has put together that shows the cap rate and the cash on cash return of the purchase. So all balloons are paid off within 2.5 years on average, unless it's a bigger commercial deal. For the smaller single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, things like that, this calculator shows when the cash on cash return would reach 8%, and then that is when they are ballooned.
Oh, okay. So in theory, you kind of have a rough rule of thumb that even though you've negotiated 5 years, your goal is to be done in 2.5, potentially sooner on smaller deals.
Correct. Yep.
So pretend I'm a seller, all right? And I'm selling to you on terms. What are the advantages to me as a seller to do seller held paper?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is the purchase price. We can come in, we could make a cash offer on a deal. Typically, if the home has been sitting or the number is a little bit higher than the area, right? That's when we see the need for this type of deal. So we can either A, make a cash offer, which again, for this example, if you want 200,000, I could make you a cash offer at 130, which could be advantageous if you need to get rid of it. Or I could come in and say, hey, I will give you that number. However, you're going to need to hold it at terms or hold that paper on terms. So what that looks like and how that benefits you, A, you get your purchase price. B, you also have a monthly payment that you're making on top of that. So in reality, your $200,000 turns into $220,000 or whatever the negotiated interest rate would be. And then 3, in the event of default, we have you protected. So if anything were to ever happen, you could come and take that property back. So all in all, you could have $100,000 with a monthly fee, and if the balloon doesn't happen or whatever the case is, you also get that asset back. So you're secured in the transaction, you make money every month, you make money on the down payment, and it's not something that's little, like $5,000, $10,000. We're talking $100,000, $200,000 down. So there's more skin in the game from my part, right, to make you also feel more comfortable with that deal.
You missed a big part for the seller. Tax deferral.
Tax deferral.
Right. So what happens if you're a seller and it's not your primary residence? A big feature is you could do a delayed 1031 exchange, or if you're looking to bump your profit into a different year because you've earned too much in earned income this one calendar year, you don't want to take all that money in one calendar year, you want to split it up over several years, you can reduce some of your tax liability by spreading it out over several years. So you get your purchase price, you get the cash flow interest, and you can get the tax deferral or a delayed 1031 exchange by doing seller held financing.
Yep, and that's a great point. A lot of people don't know that there is the ability to do a delayed 1031. That is absolutely possible, and in this case, what most sellers will do if they are investors at that property.
I've personally sold one of my investment properties to Monique, and the reason that the seller held financing was important to me is I could move profit into different years and to do a 1031 exchange. So that was the big sales feature for me. Awesome. Any other things that you think are important to talk about with seller held financing? I know it's an advantage to the buyer because you get to put a little bit less money down, and we talked about the advantages to the seller. How does it work in between for you then once you've secured your tenant? Explain that piece to me. Because I get some pushback from some of my sellers that are like, well, how can she afford to pay me off in this number of years?
Yeah.
So explain that part.
Yeah, so a lot of it is momentum. So keep in mind, this deal might not work for an investor who doesn't have a big real estate portfolio because they don't have any cash flow coming in. They don't have the correct numbers, spreadsheets, calculations to actually make a deal work. So again, the reason why this deal works for me is because I have that cash on cash return that I know through the work that I've done in the underwriting process, it is a deal for me. So really quickly, going back to a benefit of this deal for me is in the example that we use, the $200,000 purchase price. If I were to purchase that home outright, I would not have the same cash flow if I purchased at $200,000 that I do purchasing it with a lower down payment. So that allows for me to have cash flow during the months that I'm not ballooning out that seller. And because I've done this process so many times and I already have such a huge cash flow number, it's not an issue to pay off a seller.
When you've purchased the property with your $100,000 down, we're going to go back to the Silver Spring deal.
Sure.
So did you do cash or did you do a loan on Silver Spring?
I did a loan on Silver Spring.
Okay.
Yep.
So you have a mortgage on it for how much?
$105,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And your mortgage payment on that is how much?
$1,100 a month.
Okay. So it's $1,100 a month, and the rent you're collecting is how much?
$2,000 a month.
Okay. So we have $900 in theory of profit.
Correct.
But we have a seller held payment as $458 a month.
Correct.
So now we've shrunk that number to about $442 of monthly profit.
Correct.
That Monique gets to keep to use for repairs, improvements, or to balloon out a different seller. So if you extrapolate that and you have that over 100 properties, so that is how you balloon out the next ones that are coming due, is because you're using that cash flow to live on and to balloon out your prior sellers.
Correct. I also do have small flips, and still there are some burrs that I do.
Sure.
So I have those additional income streams, but yes, that is how the sellers get paid at the end.
Do you ever, within the term of the 5 years that you have with seller held financing, I'm going to assume if interest rates drop, you're going to jump on the bandwagon and you're going to refinance, and you may balloon out a huge group of sellers all at the same time, because if the interest rate is 8, suddenly it drops down to 5, and you can do a cash out refinance and drop 3 points. You may pay off a huge number of sellers and keep some cash along the way.
Yep. Every single day I would do that. If the interest rates were to drop tomorrow, that would be the first thing that I would do.
Well, thank you for providing us some pros on seller held financing. We'll have another one about cons about seller held financing.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
tuning in.